Emma Parker had been riding for 3 days straight when she finally reached Pine Valley. Her horse, Star, was as tired as she was, but Emma forced herself to sit tall in the saddle as curious eyes watched her ride down Main Street. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness invited trouble. The town wasn't much. A collection of sun-faded buildings grouped around a dusty crossroads like they were huddling together for protection against the endless sky. Emma had passed through a dozen towns just like it in the past year, always moving, never settling, searching for something she couldn't quite name. She tied Star outside what looked like a saloon and stepped onto the wooden sidewalk, her legs stiff from days in the saddle. A young boy sat on a bench outside, carving a piece of wood. "Where's a good place to find work around here?" Emma asked, fishing a penny from her pocket and flipping it to him. The boy caught it expertly. "Depends what kind of work you're after. Can you cook?" "I can do just about anything that needs doing." "Courthouse might have postings," the boy said, pointing down the street. "But most folks around here don't like hiring women for ranch work." "No offense meant." "None taken," Emma said, though she felt the familiar sting of frustration. "I'll try my luck anyway." The courthouse was a brick building that looked far too fancy for the small town surrounding it. Emma climbed the steps and found the public notice board just inside the entrance. Her eyes scanned past wanted posters and auction announcements, looking for anything that might provide a few weeks of work and a roof over her head. Then something caught her attention. A notice so unusual she had to read it 3 times to believe it was real. Property available. Meadow Brook Ranch. Approximately 300 acres. Buildings included. Sale price $1. Property sold as is. Buyer takes all responsibility. Ask at county clerk's office. Room 12. Emma stood still, her mind racing. This had to be some kind of mistake or a cruel joke. Nobody sold a ranch for $1. But even as doubt fought with hope in her chest, her feet were already carrying her toward room 12. The county clerk was a thin man with glasses sitting on the end of his nose. He looked up when Emma entered, his expression shifting from normal to slightly uncomfortable when he realized she was alone. "Can I help you, miss?" "The ranch listing on the notice board. The one for $1. Is that real?" The clerk sighed and took off his glasses, cleaning them with a handkerchief. "It is, though I'll save us both time by being honest. That property has a history. 3 families have tried to make a go of it in the past 5 years. None lasted more than a season. The land itself is decent enough, but something about the place drives people away. Accidents, bad luck, strange things happening. Call it what you will. The county just wants someone to take responsibility for it and pay the taxes going forward." Emma felt her pulse speed up. What kind of strange things happening? Animals get scared for no reason. Tools disappearing. Sounds in the night. The last family claimed they saw shadows moving when nothing was there. He shrugged. "Personally, I think it's nonsense. But superstition runs deep out here, and now nobody wants to touch the place, which is why the price is so low." "I'll take it," Emma said, the words tumbling out before she could reconsider. The clerk blinked. You're serious?" "Dead serious. I have $1. You have a deed. Seems like a simple deal to me." 20 minutes later, Emma walked out of the courthouse with a document bearing her name and the legal description of 300 acres she'd never seen. Her hands shook slightly as she folded the deed and tucked it into her shirt. She owned land. After years of drifting, of sleeping under other people's roofs and working other people's cattle, she finally had something that belonged to her alone, even if it might be cursed. The ride to Meadow Brook Ranch took longer than expected. The clerk's directions led her west out of town, then north along a barely visible trail that wound through scrub brush and rocky areas. The landscape grew more and more isolated, the signs of people fading with each mile. When the ranch finally came into view in the late afternoon light, Emma's first reaction was disappointment, so sharp it felt physical. The clerk hadn't been exaggerating about the property being sold as is. The main house sagged in the middle like a tired old horse, its front porch missing several boards. The barn was in slightly better shape, but leaned noticeably to the left. Fencing lay in tangles across what might have once been pastures, and tumbleweeds had piled against every standing surface. It was without question the sorriest piece of property Emma had ever seen. It was also hers. She got off her horse and stood for a long moment, taking it all in. Star stamped impatiently, wanting water and rest. Emma led her horse toward what she hoped was a working well near the house, and was relieved when the pump creaked to life after several hard pulls. The water that finally came out was cold and clear. At least that was something. While Star drank, Emma approached the house. The front door hung partially open, swaying slightly in the breeze. She pushed it wider and stepped inside, waiting for her eyes to adjust to the dim interior. The place smelled of dust and abandonment. Furniture remained, a table, a few chairs, an iron bed frame in what must be the bedroom, all covered in a thick layer of dirt. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the roof, lighting up dancing dust particles. In the kitchen area, Emma found a stove that looked like it might work and a few tin plates and cups left behind by previous people. It was depressing, but it wasn't hopeless. She'd slept in worse places. After settling Star with some grain Emma had bought in town, she decided to check the barn before it got completely dark. The building was larger than it appeared from far away, with multiple stalls and a loft you could reach by a ladder. Most of the stalls were empty and thick, with old straw and spider webs. But as Emma moved deeper into the barn, something made her stop. Fresh manure, not old and dried, but recent. Within the last day or two, her hand moved automatically to the pistol at her hip as she scanned the shadows. "If someone's in here, show yourself. I'm the new owner, and I'm armed." The response was immediate and unexpected. A deep rumbling snort from the last stall, followed by the sound of something large moving in the darkness. Emma approached carefully, her eyes gradually making out a shape in the gloom. When she finally understood what she was seeing, she felt her breath catch. A horse stood in the stall, watching her with an intensity that was almost scary. But this wasn't some gentle farm horse or abandoned old horse. This animal was huge, easily the largest horse Emma had ever seen up close. In the dim light, his coat appeared to be a deep reddish-brown, almost like copper that had turned color, though it was hard to tell beneath the dirt and neglect. What struck Emma most was the intelligence in his eyes. This horse was studying her just as carefully as she was studying him, figuring out whether she was dangerous or friendly. "Well," Emma said softly, "I wasn't expecting a roommate." The horse's ears turned toward her voice, but he didn't move closer or back away. He simply watched and waited. Emma could see he was in rough shape. His ribs were too easy to see. His coat was tangled with burrs and mud, and his hooves looked like they hadn't been trimmed in months. But underneath the neglect was an animal of remarkable quality, powerful back legs, a deep chest, a refined head that spoke of good breeding somewhere in his family line. "How long have you been here?" Emma asked, keeping her voice low and calm. "Did the last owners just leave you?" The horse snorted again, softer this time, almost like an answer. Emma backed away slowly, not wanting to scare him. "All right, I'm going to get myself settled for the night. Tomorrow, we'll figure out what to do about you." As she left the barn, she could feel the horse's eyes following her into the darkness. That night, Emma lay on the dusty floor of the ranch house wrapped in her bedroll, too tired to do more than minimal cleaning. Through the broken roof, she could see stars scattered across the black sky like spilled salt. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and from the barn she occasionally heard sounds of movement, her mysterious horse companion making his presence known. Emma's mind churned with questions. Who owned the horse? Had he been left behind on purpose or by accident? How had he survived on his own for what must have been weeks or months? And most importantly, what was she supposed to do about him? She had no legal claim to the animal. Technically, he might belong to the previous owners, or he could be stolen property, or he might have simply wandered onto the ranch from somewhere else. Taking possession of him could be horse theft, which was still a serious crime in some places. But as Emma stared up at the stars, she felt a strange certainty settling over her. She and that horse were meant to find each other, both abandoned, both surviving against the odds, both too stubborn to quit even when things said they should. Tomorrow, she decided, she'd start earning his trust. Whatever his story was, they were in this together now. Dawn came too early, announced by roosters that Emma hadn't known existed on the property. She dragged herself upright, every muscle protesting after days of travel and a night on a hard floor. Her first priority was getting a fire going in the stove and making coffee strong enough to wake the dead. While she waited for the coffee to boil, Emma took stock of her supplies. She had enough food for maybe a week if she was careful, a small amount of grain for Star, and exactly $17.32 to her name. Not much to build a new life on, but she'd managed with less before. After forcing down some hard bread and dried beef, Emma filled a bucket with water and headed to the barn. Star nickered a greeting, but Emma's attention was on the last stall where the big copper-colored horse waited. He was standing alert when she arrived, clearly having heard her approach. In the morning light, streaming through gaps in the barn walls, Emma could see him more clearly. His coat really was a remarkable shade of copper, like a shiny penny. His mane and tail, though tangled, were long and full, and those eyes, dark and knowing, tracked her every movement. "Good morning," Emma said quietly. "I've brought you some water. I'll set it right here." She placed the bucket just outside the stall, within his reach, but not so close that he'd feel cornered. The horse looked at the bucket, but made no move toward it while she was near. Emma grabbed a pitchfork and began the unpleasant job of cleaning out Star's stall, keeping up a steady stream of conversation. "I figure we should get properly introduced. My name's Emma Parker. I bought this place yesterday, though calling it a purchase seems generous when it only cost $1. I'm guessing you've been here longer than me. Got a name?" "No, of course you don't. Or if you do, you're not telling." She worked steadily, filling the wheelbarrow with old straw and manure, then wheeling it outside to dump in what looked like it had once been a manure pile. When she returned, she noticed the big horse had moved closer to the water bucket, though he still hadn't drunk from it. "I know you don't trust me yet," Emma continued. "That's smart. Trust should be earned, not given freely. But here's my situation. I can't keep calling you horse or seems disrespectful. So I'm going to give you a name, at least for now. How about Copper? Because of your coat. Simple, but it fits." The horse's ears turned toward her voice, and Emma chose to take that as acceptance. Over the next several hours, she worked on making the barn more livable for both horses. She found a surprising amount of usable hay in the loft, dry and still sweet-smelling despite its age. She cleaned and filled water containers. She fixed a broken gate on one of the stalls, and all the while she talked to Copper, letting him get used to her voice, her smell, her presence. By mid-afternoon, Copper had drunk the water she'd left and had even accepted a small offering of hay, though he still wouldn't let her within 10 feet of him. Progress, Emma thought. Slow, but progress nonetheless. The next week fell into a rhythm. Emma would wake with the sun, take care of both horses, then spend her days working on urgent repairs around the property. The house needed the most attention, patching the roof with boards taken from a collapsed shed, sweeping out months of dirt and debris, making the place barely livable. It was exhausting work, made harder by the summer heat and her shrinking supplies. But every morning and evening she made time for Copper. She'd bring him fresh water and hay, clean around his stall, though never inside it while he was there, and talk to him about her day, her plans, her past. She told him about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about losing her parents to fever, about the years of drifting from job to job, never quite finding where she belonged. Copper listened with those intelligent eyes, never approaching, but never running away either. It was a careful dance between two tired souls, each waiting for the other to make the first move toward real connection. The breakthrough came on the 8th day. Emma had been singing while she worked, an old song her mother used to hum while cooking dinner. She wasn't paying much attention to Coppa's stall, focused instead on replacing a broken board in Star's section of the barn. She didn't notice Copper had left his stall until she turned around and found him standing less than 5 feet away, his head lowered, his ears forward with curiosity rather than aggression. Emma froze mid-motion, hardly daring to breathe. They stood like that for what felt like forever, woman and horse, each studying the other, the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Then Emma did something that surprised even herself. She sat down on the barn floor, making herself smaller, less threatening. She started singing again, soft and low, keeping her hands visible and relaxed. Copper took one step forward, then another. Then he stretched his neck out and touched his nose to Emma's outstretched hand, his whiskers soft against her rough palm. "Hello, Copper," Emma whispered, tears unexpectedly stinging her eyes. "It's good to finally meet you properly." After that day, things changed quickly. Copper began following Emma around the property, keeping a respectful distance, but clearly interested in what she was doing. He'd neigh when he heard her voice in the morning. He started accepting treats, apples she'd bought on her last trip to town, carefully cut into pieces. Most importantly, he allowed her to touch him. At first, just his neck and shoulders, always with slow, careful movements that gave him time to move away if he chose. But gradually, as trust built between them, Emma was able to run her hands over his entire body, checking the condition he was in. What she found worried her. Beyond the obvious lack of food and neglected hooves, Copper had old scars, rope burns on his legs, what looked like whip marks on his back end, and a poorly healed injury on his left front leg. Someone had treated this beautiful animal badly, and Emma felt anger burn in her chest at the thought. "Nobody's going to hurt you again," she promised him one evening as she carefully worked tangles out of his mane with her fingers. "Not while I'm here." The work of changing the ranch from disaster to working operation was slow and often discouraging. Emma quickly realized her limited money wouldn't stretch far enough to buy everything she needed. She made do with what she could salvage, trade for, or make up. Fencing was her biggest challenge. Miles of barbed wire lay rusted and useless. The wooden posts rotted through, or missing entirely. She managed to fix small sections using wood from collapsed buildings, but it was like trying to empty an ocean with a teaspoon. On one of her trips to town for supplies, Emma stopped at the general store and found herself face to face with the owner, a weathered man in his 60s named Mr. Johnson. "You're the woman who bought the Meadow Brook place," he said. It wasn't a question. "That's right. For $1, he continued, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "The best dollar I ever spent," Emma replied evenly. Johnson studied her for a long moment. "You got guts. I'll give you that. Most folks who've tried that property didn't last a month before the bad luck drove them off. I don't believe in bad luck, just hard work and stubbornness. Well, you'll need both in large amounts." He began gathering the items on her list. Word of advice. Some of the ranchers around here aren't happy about a woman trying to run a property on her own. They think it makes them look bad, or that you'll fail and bring down property values. Watch yourself. Emma felt a chill despite the warm day. Thanks for the warning. As she loaded her supplies onto Star, a group of men came out from the saloon across the street. One of them, a thick-set man with a red face and an aggressive posture, called out to her. "That's her, boys. The lady rancher." Laughter followed his words, ugly and mocking. Emma kept her eyes forward and her hands steady, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. But as she rode out of town, she could feel their eyes on her back, like physical weight. The first real threat came 2 weeks later. Emma had been working on fixing a water container near the house when Copper suddenly appeared from the pasture where he'd been grazing. His entire body was tense, his ears pinned back, his nostrils wide open. He positioned himself between Emma and the road, clearly upset by something she couldn't yet see. Then she heard it, the sound of approaching riders. 3 men on horseback came over the rise, riding onto her property with the casual confidence of people who didn't expect to be challenged. Emma recognized one of them as the red-faced man from town, though she didn't know his name. She straightened up, wiping her hands on her pants, and waited for them to approach. Copper stayed close to her side, his body practically shaking with tension. The riders stopped about 20 feet away, their horses dancing nervously under Coppa's unwavering stare. "Afternoon," the red-faced man said, his tone falsely friendly. "Name's Dan Miller. These are my associates. We own property next to yours, Mr. Miller." Emma nodded. "What can I do for you?" "Well, that's just it. You can't do anything for us. But we might be able to do something for you." He leaned forward in his saddle. "See, this land you bought, it's no good. Cursed, some say. You're going to fail, same as everyone else. So we're here to make you a fair offer. We'll take the property off your hands for $20. That's 20 times what you paid for it. Can't say fairer than that." Emma felt Copper shift beside her, moving even closer. "The property isn't for sale at any price." Miller's smile faded. "Now, don't be stupid about this. A woman alone can't run a ranch. You got no help, no money, and winter's coming. You'll be begging us to take it off your hands in a few months anyway. Might as well save yourself the trouble and sell now." "I appreciate your concern," Emma said, her voice cold as winter steel. "But my answer is no. This is my land, legally purchased. If you have no other business here, I'd appreciate you leaving." One of the other men, younger and meaner looking than Miller, spat in the dirt. "That's a fine-looking horse you got there. Wouldn't want anything to happen to him." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Emma's hand moved toward her hip, where her pistol rested, and the men noticed. Miller held up a hand. Now, no need for unpleasantness. We're just being neighborly. But you think about our offer, Miss Parker. Things have a way of going wrong for people who don't have friends out here." They turned their horses and rode away, but Emma knew this wasn't over. As they disappeared from sight, she rested a hand on Coppa's neck, feeling the coiled power beneath his coat. "There's going to be trouble," she said quietly. "Both of us need to be careful from now on." That night, Emma barely slept. Every sound outside had her reaching for her rifle, imagining Miller and his men returning under cover of darkness. But the night passed without incident, and morning brought a new day of endless work. As weeks passed, the harassment got worse in small ways. Tools disappeared from where Emma left them. A section of fence she'd just fixed was torn down overnight. She found boot prints near the barn one morning, evidence someone had been sneaking around while she slept. Most disturbing was the morning she found a dead coyote hanging from her gate. A clear message that worse things could happen if she didn't leave. Emma cut it down and buried it, her jaw set with determination. She'd survived too much to be scared off now. Copper became increasingly protective during this time. He'd position himself between Emma and any possible threats, his ears constantly turning to catch sounds she couldn't hear. At night, he'd stay near the house rather than in the barn, a self-appointed guardian watching over the property. One evening, as Emma sat on the porch cleaning her rifle, Copper stood nearby, his head high as he looked over their small kingdom. "You know what I think," Emma said aloud. "I think someone hurt you badly before you came here. That's why you were so careful at first. And I think maybe you're protecting me because you understand what it's like to need protection." Copper turned his head to look at her, and in that moment, Emma felt certain he understood every word. "We're going to make it through this," she continued. "Together, because neither of us has anywhere else to go, and sometimes that's the best reason to fight." The situation came to a head on a moonless night in late September. Emma was awakened by Coppa's warning call, a sharp, piercing neigh unlike anything she'd heard from him before. She grabbed her rifle and burst out of the house to find Copper standing in the yard, facing toward the eastern pasture where an orange glow was growing against the dark sky. Fire. Emma's blood turned to ice. She could see figures on horseback outlined against the flames, riding in circles to spread the fire further. This wasn't an accident or bad luck. This was deliberate destruction. She fired a shot into the air, more to announce her presence than with any hope of hitting the distant riders. They scattered immediately, disappearing into the darkness, but the fire continued to grow, eating the dry grass with terrifying speed. For the next 2 hours, Emma fought the fire with everything she had. She hauled bucket after bucket of water from the well, her arms screaming in protest. She beat at flames with wet burlap sacks until her hands were raw and bleeding. She dug fire breaks with a shovel, trying to contain the fire before it reached the barn and house. And Copper was there, beside her through it all. He used his hooves to stamp out smaller flames. He stayed close enough that Emma could grab his mane when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. He was her partner in every sense, fighting for their home with the same desperation she felt. When the fire finally burned itself out against a rocky outcropping Emma had used as a natural firebreak, she collapsed in the dirt, coughing and covered in soot. Roughly 5 acres of grazing land had been destroyed, but the buildings were safe. Copper lowered his head to nuzzle her shoulder, and Emma wrapped her arms around his neck, too exhausted even for tears. "We survived," she said hoarsely, "but they're not going to stop. We can't fight this alone." The next morning, despite her exhaustion and every muscle in her body screaming in protest, Emma saddled Star and rode into town. She was done being nice, done trying to handle this on her own. She went straight to the sheriff's office and filed a formal complaint against Dan Miller, listing every incident of harassment and naming him as the main suspect in the fire attack. The sheriff, a tired-looking man in his 50s, listened with an expression that told Emma he wasn't going to do anything about it. "You got proof Miller was involved?" he asked. "I saw riders, 3 of them. Same number that visited my property to threaten me. Seeing riders isn't proof of who they were. Could have been anyone. Drifters maybe. Or kids causing trouble." Emma's hands clenched into fists. "You're not going to investigate this." "Didn't say that. I'll look into it. But without solid evidence," he shrugged. "My advice, sell the property and move on. Save yourself a lot of grief." Emma left the sheriff's office, feeling more alone than ever. The message was clear. She had no allies in this fight. The law wouldn't protect her, and the townspeople would rather see her fail than support a woman trying to succeed at what they considered a man's job. She was loading supplies at the general store when Mr. Johnson called her over to the counter. He looked around to make sure they were alone before speaking in a low voice. "I heard about the fire. I'm sorry. Did you also hear the sheriff won't do anything about it?" Johnson nodded grimly. "Miller has friends in this town, men with influence. They don't like the idea of you making a success of that ranch because it challenges their ideas about how things should be. So I'm on my own." "Not entirely." Johnson pulled out a box of ammunition and set it on the counter. "This is free. And I want you to know there are people here who admire what you're trying to do. We might not be able to help openly, but we're watching. If Miller goes too far, if he tries something in town where witnesses can see, that's when we can act." It wasn't much, but it was something. Emma thanked him and rode back to her ranch with the weight of ammunition in her saddlebags and the burden of knowledge in her heart. The next attack would come, and she needed to be ready. She spent the following days preparing. She created better sight lines around the property by clearing brush and fallen wood. She positioned buckets of water at important points. She made sure her rifle and pistol were cleaned, loaded, and within easy reach at all times. And she talked to Copper, explaining what was coming and asking for his help once more. "I don't have the right to ask you to risk yourself for me," she told him one evening as she brushed his now shining coat. "You don't owe me anything. If you want to run when the trouble comes, I'll understand." Copper turned his head and looked at her with those impossibly knowing eyes, and Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion. "All right then," she whispered. "We'll face it together." The attack came 3 nights later, just as Emma had known it would. The sound of hoofbeats woke her. Not 3 riders this time, but at least 6, maybe more. She grabbed her rifle and positioned herself at a window, trying to count the shapes moving in the darkness. They came from multiple directions at the same time, clearly having learned from their previous attempt. Torches flew through the air, landing near the barn, the house, the remaining good pasture. Gunshots cracked through the night, though whether they were aimed at Emma or just meant to scare her, she couldn't tell. Emma returned fire, aiming for the torches rather than the riders. She managed to put out one before it could start a fire, then another, but there were too many of them, and she was just one person. That's when Copper entered the fight. The big stallion burst from his position near the barn with a battle cry that sent chills down Emma's spine. He charged directly at a group of riders, his size and speed and pure fury scattering their horses in panic. One rider was thrown when his horse bucked wildly. Another's horse ran away, with its rider hanging on desperately to the saddle. Emma used the distraction to put out more torches, preventing new fires from taking hold. She and Copper worked together, each covering the other's weaknesses, each making the other stronger. But they were still outnumbered and exhausted, and Emma knew they couldn't hold out much longer. She had just reloaded her rifle when she heard the most beautiful sound in the world. More hoofbeats approaching, but from the direction of town. Mr. Johnson appeared first, riding hard despite his age, a shotgun across his saddle. Behind him came 4 more townspeople, all armed, all ready to fight. "For Miss Parker," Johnson shouted, and the reinforcements joined the battle. The tide turned immediately. Miller's men, faced with unexpected and overwhelming opposition, broke and ran. Some scattered individually, others fled in groups. But within minutes, the property was clear of attackers. Emma stumbled out onto the porch, her rifle lowering as the reality of survival washed over her. Copper limped toward her, and she saw with horror that he'd been grazed by a bullet across his right shoulder. It wasn't deep, but blood covered his copper coat, dark in the lamplight. "You're hurt," she said, her voice breaking as she ran her hands over him, checking for other injuries. Copper pressed his head against her chest, his breathing hard but steady. Johnson approached on foot, having gotten off his horse. "That's one amazing horse you've got there, Miss Parker." Fought like he understood exactly what was at stake. Emma looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, all of you. I thought. I didn't think anyone would come. You gave us something to believe in," Johnson said simply. A woman fighting alone against men who thought power gave them rights. Some of us remembered what it was like to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. The other townspeople echoed his feelings, tipping their hats or nodding respectfully before mounting up to return home. After they left, Emma tended to Kappa's wound, cleaning and bandaging it as best she could. He stood patiently through her care, occasionally turning his head to nuzzle her shoulder. "We won," she told him softly. "But more than that, we proved something. We proved that determination and partnership can overcome almost anything." In the aftermath of that night, everything changed for Emma and her dollar ranch. Word spread quickly about the battle and about the copper stallion who'd fought alongside his owner against overwhelming odds. People who'd previously ignored Emma now tipped their hats when she came to town. Ranchers who dismissed her started offering advice and occasionally help. Dan Miller and his associates left the territory entirely, apparently deciding that continuing their vendetta wasn't worth the risk now that the town had taken Emma's side. With support from neighbors and her own hard work, Emma transformed the ranch over the following year. Fences were repaired and strengthened. The house and barn received proper maintenance. She built up a small but healthy herd of cattle, got chickens and a milk cow, and even planted a vegetable garden that actually produced food. But through all of it, Copper remained the heart of everything she built. He was her transportation when she needed to cover ground quickly. He was her partner in working the cattle. He was her early warning system when anything unusual approached the property. And most importantly, he was her friend and companion through the lonely hours and difficult decisions that came with running a ranch alone. Emma never did discover Kappa's full history, who'd owned him before, where he'd come from, or how he'd ended up abandoned at the Meadow Brook Ranch. In some ways, it didn't matter. What mattered was that two lost souls had found each other when they both needed it most. On a spring morning, almost 2 years after she'd bought the ranch, Emma stood on her front porch with a cup of coffee, watching Copper graze in the green pasture. The scars from the fire had long since healed, replaced by thick grass that attracted both her cattle and wild deer passing through. The ranch had become profitable, not wealthy by any means, but sustainable and growing. Emma had paid off the back taxes and even had a small amount saved. She'd hired a young man from town to help with the heaviest work, and she'd started teaching a teenage girl who wanted to learn ranching despite her family's objections. But more than financial success, Emma had found something she hadn't even known she was searching for: a sense of belonging. This land was hers in a way that went beyond legal documents. She'd watered it with her sweat and tears, defended it with her blood, and built it up through pure, stubborn determination. Copper lifted his head from grazing and looked toward the porch, his ears pointed forward. Even from a distance, Emma could see the contentment in his posture. He'd filled out beautifully, his copper coat shining in the sunlight, his movements confident and powerful. "Come here, boy," Emma called. Copper trotted over, and Emma met him at the porch steps. She wrapped her arms around his massive neck, breathing in his familiar smell of grass and sunshine and earth. "You know what the best part of buying this place was?" she asked him. "It wasn't the land, even though I love every acre. It wasn't proving the doubters wrong, though that was satisfying. It was finding you. You showed me that family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the souls you choose to stand beside when everything goes wrong." Kappa's response was to rest his chin on her shoulder, a gesture that had become their private language for understanding and affection. Emma smiled and stroked his neck. "We built something here, you and I, something that's going to last. And whatever comes next, whatever challenges we face, we'll face them the same way we faced everything else. Together." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Emma released Copper and watched him return to his grazing. She had work to do, fences to check, cattle to move to fresh pasture, 1,000 small tasks that made up the daily rhythm of ranch life. But first, she stood there for another moment, looking out over her land, her home, her hard-won piece of paradise. She'd bought a ranch for $1, and found so much more than property. She'd found purpose, community, and a partner whose loyalty and courage had saved her life more than once. The dollar Emma Parker spent at the Pine Valley Courthouse was the best investment she ever made, not because of the land it purchased, but because of the horse who was waiting in the barn and the life they built together against all odds. Sometimes the most valuable things come in the most unexpected packages. Sometimes a curse is really a blessing in disguise. And sometimes a woman and a horse can prove that determination, trust, and partnership are more powerful than any obstacle. Emma Parker and Copper had proven all of that and more, and their story, told and retold around fireplaces and in saloons across the territory, became a legend of its own. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life cost almost nothing. And that family comes in many forms, including 4 legs and a copper-colored coat. If Emma and Coppa's story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe for more incredible tales of the unbreakable bonds between horses and humans. Have you ever had a special horse that changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. We love hearing from our community. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story today, please share it with them. Remember, sometimes the most valuable partnerships cost nothing but trust and determination. Until next time, keep riding and keep believing in the power of these magnificent creatures.